So Dennis Witzke is also known as the actor named Ed Harris, and he is also known as the serial killer named Otis Toole. So when looking up Dennis Witzke on the internet, I found this photo, and here is Dennis Witzke at a dog show, and standing right next to him is Reverend Goss. So I do not know what year this was taken, but Dennis Witzke was my mother's boyfriend around 1999, and this is exactly how he looked. So I would guess that this photo was taken around 1999. And here is Dennis Witzke at a dog show, and standing right next to him is Reverend Goss. So this is Reverend Robert Goss, probably in the late 90s. When I was doing my report called The Flower of Life, I started to look up the Oddfellows on the internet, which is something like the Freemasons. It's a secret society. And I found a Facebook page for the New Milford Oddfellows, and I was able to get quite a few photographs of the New Milford Oddfellows. So here is Reverend Robert Goss, photographed many times with members of the New Milford Oddfellows at the Oddfellows Hall in New Milford, Connecticut. It's called the Good Shepherd Lodge. So Reverend Robert Goss, he was a New Milford, Connecticut Oddfellow. And I do not know when these photographs were taken of Reverend Goss with the New Milford Oddfellows, but I would guess maybe around 2010 or 2015. And he's gotten a little bit older, and it looks like he's gained a lot of weight. And here he is, around 2020, at the Federated Church of Marlborough, New Hampshire. And he looks like this. He looks like he's lost weight. It also looks like he's had plastic surgery. I would not be surprised to learn that he's had a facelift and maybe some augmentation around his eyes or his cheekbones. So it is pretty interesting that Robert Goss would live in New Milford, Connecticut, and now, many years later, Robert Goss, who was a New Milford, Connecticut Oddfellow, now living in Marlborough, New Hampshire, and he's some sort of gay activist at the Federated Church of Marlborough, New Hampshire. There are two gay men that both preach at the Federated Church of Marlborough. The younger one's name is Joseph Goss, and the older one's name is Robert Goss. And they tell everybody that they are a married couple. So it's pretty unusual that I am an activist and I expose things like secret societies and religious crimes. And men like Reverend Robert Goss have seemed to follow me from the New Milford, Brookfield area in Connecticut all the way up to Marlborough, New Hampshire, where he's given a job at the local church called the Federated Church of Marlborough. So Dennis Witzke is also known as the actor named Ed Harris. And he is also known as the serial killer named Otis Toole. And Otis Toole is a gay man. And Otis Toole and another homosexual named Henry Lee Lucas admitted to killing something like 1,000 people. And if you read a few of their interviews, you'll quickly realize that these are some of the most evil men that have ever walked the face of the earth. There was an interview in a publication called Boiled Angel. I think it was a weird comic book or magazine. And they had an interview with Otis Toole. And in that interview, Otis Toole describes raping young boys and then killing them and then eating them in a stew. And Otis Toole will tell anyone interviewing him that he is gay. And he will tell you that he was molested by gay men when he was a young boy. So what I will tell you is that this is what causes these people to grow up gay, is because they are molested as children by gay predators. They are programmed and conditioned to be gay. This is what causes them to be gay when they get older. So Otis Toole is a pretty sick individual. And this is the guy that Reverend Robert Goss is photographed with at a dog show. So it appears that Reverend Robert Goss is friends with Otis Toole. He is a member of the Oddfellows in New Milford, Connecticut. And then when I moved to Marlborough, New Hampshire, for some reason, Robert Goss becomes the reverend at the local Federated Church, which advertises itself on the internet as being a gay-friendly church run by a gay married couple. So this guy that hangs out with Otis Toole is an ex-Jesuit priest. He's an ex-Roman Catholic priest. And he writes pro-gay books like Queering Christ, the Queer Bible Commentary, Unlocking Orthodoxies for Inclusive Theologies, Queer Alternatives, Jesus Acted Up, a Gay and Lesbian Manifesto. I'm reading Reverend Robert Goss's book called Queering Christ, and it starts off like a memoir in a way. It kind of summarizes what his life was when he was younger, and what he says is that as far back as he could remember, he was gay, and for some reason he thought it was sinful to be gay. But then at the same time, he says that he learned from the older boys in his neighborhood how to masturbate, and they would have what's called circle jerks, and the older boys would instruct the younger ones how to jerk off. So that is a homosexual act. So he is living in a weird neighborhood for the kids in the neighborhood to do that. That's not a normal thing for regular kids to do. Regular kids, they become attracted to girls when they hit puberty. This circle jerk thing suggests that he's living in some sort of gay neighborhood. He's surrounded by a bunch of gay young men to do that. That is not a normal act. So it doesn't sound like that he's a minority if he has every kid in his neighborhood or a group in his neighborhood that are into jerking off with a bunch of boys. It sounds like he's in good company as far as a young gay kid. So then it says that he developed an attraction to Jesus Christ. I guess he would become attracted to images of Jesus Christ. When I was in Sunday school, they would hand out pamphlets that had illustrations of Jesus Christ. And he had longer hair and brown eyes and a beard. And he kind of looked like a nice young man. He looked around 35 or 40. And he looked like a really good person. And when you read the Bible or you hear the teachings, I don't know where sex would become intertwined with that. So the only way I can relate to that is to say that when I see images of the Virgin Mary or a Roman Catholic saint that's a female, there were a few of these saint cards that I got throughout my life. And one was a very pretty, she looked Irish. She looked like a young Irish woman who was a saint. I forget her name. And she was very attractive, very pretty. But the last thing that I would do is fantasize about this saint. I would want to read what she did, what she represented, and how pretty she looked. But I wouldn't become sexually attracted to her. Same thing when I read these different religious texts. When I would read the New Testament, I don't know at what point you would become sexually attracted to the people in these stories. What part of the New Testament is a turn on? I cannot think of one part of the New Testament or any part of the Bible that becomes sexually arousing to read. For the most part, they are kind of intense stories about what people like Jesus Christ had to go through, because it's kind of like watching an adventure movie or a horror movie. And as you're watching the adventure movie or the horror movie, even if it's like an intellectual thing, you should be kind of caught up in what is taking place. And you shouldn't really think about sex. You shouldn't equate the two, because things get confused that way. If your house is burning down and the fire department comes to put out the fire, do you get sexually attracted to the firemen? If you're watching a movie about the cops trying to bust a serial killer and they're going through basically hell to catch a serial killer or a group of serial killers, at what point do you start getting sexually attracted to the cops? So I do not know when you would become attracted to Jesus Christ, but Reverend Robert Goss continues to say that he is sexually attracted to Jesus Christ. So it says that when he got older, he joined the Jesuits. He was not attracted to women. He did not want to get married. So he decided to join the Jesuits. And I guess like a nun who is told that they are the wives of Jesus. They don't get married to a husband. They devote their life to the church and they become the wives of Jesus Christ. I think that's what a good deal of the nuns are told. So these guys are also, they develop this programming, kind of like nuns. They devote their life to Jesus Christ. But if they're gay, I guess they're developing sexual attractions to Jesus Christ. So it's kind of unusual how that they are programming these men that go on to become priests, to kind of equating sex and religion, becoming sexually interested in these figures of their religion. That suggests programming of the Roman Catholic Church. So later on in life, he says that Jesus became something of a lover to him. That's how he describes it. Jesus Christ started off as a friend when he was a young kid. And that developed into an idea that Jesus Christ was like his lover or boyfriend. So I don't know how he would come up with that. I don't know how that would metamorphosize in his life. And then later, Jesus Christ would become like a rebel and encourage him to quit the Jesuits and then become a gay activist that puts down the Roman Catholic Church for condemning and suppressing sexuality. So that's a common thing for the Jesuits. They always have these people that were Jesuit priests that quit the church and then they become activists to tell you how bad the Roman Catholic Church is. So I am starting to think that that is a program from the Jesuits. That is their place in the Roman Catholic Church, to act like they are the activists, to act like they are the rebels of the Roman Catholic Church. They're the ones who always want to condemn the Roman Catholic Church. They are the Roman Catholic Church's controlled opposition. They are the ones who are elected to criticize the Roman Catholic Church. So what is interesting is through Reverend Robert Goss, you have a gay priest condemning the practices of all the gay priests that are controlling the Roman Catholic Church. When you divide all the sexes and you say that the priests cannot get married, they cannot have a relationship with a woman, they cannot have children, and the women cannot get married to men and they cannot have children, and you divide the sexes between the priests and the nuns, that's homosexual. That is the ultimate meaning for being gay. That's what the gay people do. Gay men refuse to get married with women and have kids, so they only hang out with the guys. So you cannot get more gay than the Roman Catholic Church telling their priests and nuns they cannot get married. So if they do not like the strict control of the Roman Catholic Church, then obviously they do not like the gay control of the church, because that is what's controlling the Roman Catholic Church, is the gay mentality. So it becomes obvious when you see this process. You have a bunch of gay priests that are suppressing that they are gay. You can't tell anybody that you're gay in the Roman Catholic Church. And even if you masturbate, you're committing some sort of sin, according to some priests. So this sort of attitude raises Robert Goss, who will suppress his sexuality, and his only avenue is to join the Jesuit priests of the Roman Catholic Church, so that he could eventually break away from them and then preach to people how he's proud to be gay, which indoctrinates people into being gay. And with more people being gay, I guess the Roman Catholic Church will have more power. So it kind of goes around in a circle. You have a product of the Roman Catholic Church standing up and condemning the Roman Catholic Church. So you could go to him, you could follow him and his gay teachings, or you could follow the Roman Catholic Church and their gay but suppressed practices. Either way you go, it leads you to homosexuality. If you want to keep it quiet, join the Jesuits and be a gay in secret. And then once you get done being a gay in secret, once you get done being a Roman Catholic priest, you could come out of the Jesuits and be an open gay in the community who's going to preach more gay stuff. So no matter what street you take, it'll lead you to the homosexual community. It'll lead you to homosexuality, either open or in the closet. And they complement each other. Both sides of the coin exist to complement each other, to keep the whole program going. And what is very sick is that these gay priests are going to develop a sexual attraction to Jesus Christ. That is like watching a film or reading a book about a guy who's fighting absolute and pure evil. He's fighting for his life. He's fighting to save people. He's fighting for his planet. And these guys are sexually attracted to that. With all this other stuff going on, at what point do you have the time to be sexually attracted to that? At what point do you go crazy and become sexually attracted to that? I don't know. When I see a female Jedi in the movie, when I see a female warrior, when I see a female soldier, when I watch G.I. Jane, when I see a woman doing things that are very important, at no point do I become sexually attracted to her. That is just so far removed from my mind. I'm focused on these more important actions and things that are happening concerning her. So these people are pretty disturbed to have sexual feelings about these religious figures. This is a Roman Catholic program for gay men. And once you go through the Jesuits, once you go through their closet, then they are released into the community as open gay men. And what they don't want to tell you is that they still work for the church. They still work for the clergy. In one of his sermons, he says he is a member of the clergy. Well, what do you mean you're a member of the clergy? If I was a preacher and I wanted to describe myself as a Christian, I would say I'm a Christian, or I'm a Christian preacher, or I read some Hindu texts, I read some Buddhist philosophy, but I am a Christian, but I am a Christian preacher, but I am a reverend. What Robert Goss says is he says that he is involved in Buddhist the Buddhist religion, but he is a member of the Christian clergy. That is a very interesting way to explain that. Once again, he is not individual. He is not independent. He is not a Christian preacher or a Christian. He is a member of the Christian clergy. That sounds very Jesuit. That sounds very Roman Catholic. You broke out of the Jesuits, but you're still part of the Christian clergy. You're still part of some group of clergy members. So they give little signs while they discuss who they are and what they're involved in and their stories in life. He never broke apart from the Roman Catholic Church. He's not really an activist against the Roman Catholic Church. He is still an agent of the Jesuits, and he still does the work for the Roman Catholic Church. And that is exactly what they want to support as their controlled opposition. If you don't like the gay, weird practices of the Roman Catholic Church, they have pedophiles in their ranks. If you don't like hearing that the Roman Catholic Church is corrupt, is greedy, they have a bunch of Stone Age, archaic rites and practices and philosophy. So if you want to protest the Roman Catholic Church, go become a follower of Robert Goss, an ex-Jesuit who is now out of the closet and proud to be gay. He's proud to be a product of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, then he begins to discuss flogging himself, whipping himself, as he thinks about Jesus Christ being tortured. Jesus Christ was arrested, he was whipped, and then he was crucified. So he wanted to go through the same thing. So he would flog himself. He would whip himself. And it says, I never drew blood, but left bruises on my shoulders. The Roman soldiers whipped Jesus, crowned him with thorns. They spat at him, stripped him, and crucified him. Passionately, I whipped myself in identification with Jesus and in love for him. I wanted to share the sufferings of the man I loved. Sometimes looking back, I wonder if flagellation was not a form of masturbation. My Jesuit piety promoted an erotic identification with Jesus. Some former Jesuit friends have told me stories of becoming sexually aroused while flogging themselves. I can now see how Father Raymond Bertrand, my novice master, fostered a homoerotic relationship with the imagined naked body of Jesus writhing in pain on the cross. So what he's telling you is that these Jesuits are getting off on the fact that Jesus Christ was tortured and crucified. It becomes S&M, which stands for sadism and masochism. Sadism is getting pleasure from inflicting pain onto others, and masochism is getting sexual pleasure from inflicting pain onto yourself. S&M, sadomasochism. So that is what these Jesuit priests and these Roman Catholic priests are admitting when they hear about Jesus Christ being crucified. They're getting off on that. They're looking at it as a sexual act. It becomes pleasurable to them to see someone like Jesus Christ being tortured and crucified. So this is pretty sick. These men are pretty sick. Every time I read the New Testament, when I would read the part about Jesus Christ being tortured, I thought, what a drag. I can't wait to get through this part. I can't bear to hear this. This sucks. I can't wait till this part is over. This is their favorite part. This is what they're equating with sex. So this is a big part in the Roman Catholic religion. When you go to Roman Catholic Church, you will see the crucifix that's hanging at the front of the church. And that is Jesus Christ's crucified body. He's nailed onto a wooden cross. And then along the walls inside the church are these plaques that are called the Stations of the Cross. And they show all the different acts of the Romans torturing Jesus Christ before they crucify him. So it's a big deal in the Roman Catholic Church is the crucifixion. A huge emphasis is put on that. It seems like that is the main part of their religion. And when you hear what these priests are telling you, that they're not only attracted to Jesus Christ, but they're attracted to him suffering as he's being executed, that is a big turn on to these men. So that exposes a lot about the gay clergy and then these gay activists that are coming out of the Jesuit closet, the liberal side of the Roman Catholic Church. So the one last thing I want to say is this. This guy who is married to Reverend Robert Goss is named Joseph Goss. And I was listening to some of his lectures, some of his sermons that were uploaded onto YouTube. And he looked very familiar too. And I finally realized that Reverend Joseph Goss is also from the New Milford area. And he went by the name of John Zachar. And I met him at Brookfield High School. He went to Brookfield High School for 1 semester. I think he said his dad rented a house in Brookfield, but then they moved to New Milford. So John Zachar was an unusual kid. When I was a junior, he said he was a sophomore, and he walked up to me in the hallways, and he began by complimenting me. And he told me about all these great rumors and all of these things that he heard about me. I had quite a reputation, according to him. I was just one of the coolest guys in the school. And he went on and on and on about that. And I had to tell him, okay, you said that already. Just drop it. Because that was the only thing he wanted to talk about. So he dressed like a skater. He had a pretty cool style to him. And he seemed like an intelligent kid. So I hung out with him a few times after school. And both of us smoked pot. So I said, meet me in the parking lot after school and I'll give you a ride home. And on the way there, we would smoke a joint. So I hung out with him a couple of times. But I noticed one thing about John Zachar was that after he was done complimenting you and after he was able to get into your car and you were hanging out, he quickly started to act like a little bitch. He began to speak in a condescending manner. He began to kind of talk down to you and be very rude when you tried to make conversation with him. He would act extremely rude and snide and condescending, like he thought he was pretty smart. But I would laugh it off, and I really wouldn't pay it much mind. But I noticed that, and because of that, he was slightly unlikable, and I really did not pursue the friendship. But I think he got my number, and he would call me a couple of times a year. He would call me up out of the blue and want to hang out. He would ask me if I knew where to get weed, for example, or if I wanted to come visit him in New Milford. So I would see him once or twice a year in the following years after we graduated high school. So I guess it was around 1996. John Zachar called me up out of the blue. He acted like he was very excited to invite me up to Old Saybrook, Connecticut, to basically go party over there, to drink beers, smoke pot, and hang out on the beach. And he says to me, hey, why don't you come to my mom's house for the weekend? She lives in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, which is right by the ocean, and she runs an ice cream parlor. He made it sound as if we were going to have a great time. We'll get some beer, I got some weed, and we could hang out down by the ocean. So as soon as I got down there, his attitude changed. And again, he began acting very rude. And he acted like he was pissed off. And he hated the fact that I was there. So I'm going to guess that something didn't work out as planned for one reason or another. And due to that, he didn't even want to act cordial. He acted like it was a big drag that he had to hang out with me. And he said he was going to school to become an auto mechanic. And he wanted to change the timing belt on his car. So we started doing that. And I helped him from time to time as he attempted to change the timing belt on the vehicle. He was very rude. He didn't want to have a conversation. He didn't want to take a break from working on his car and walk down to the water. He said, "You could go down there if you want, but I have to do this. I have to fix this car. I just can't hang out all day and waste time." He would say things like that, which was the exact opposite of what he said to get me up there. So after an hour or two of working on his car, I said, "Do you want to go check out the ice cream store?" And he would say something like, "Well, you can if you want, but go in the front and tell my mother what you want, but you're going to have to pay for it." And I said, "Well, why don't we go in there after she closes so we could take a look around?" And he says, "No, because once she closes and she cleans up, she doesn't want anybody in there making a mess." And I said, "Well, I thought you said you worked there. You ran the place." And he says, "Yeah, but I don't want to do that." So he wouldn't even show me the ice cream store that was in the front of his mother's house. So the whole time he acted very rude. So why would you invite someone to your house, insist they come up for basically a party, and once you get up there, to treat them like that? It does not make any sense unless you consider that he wanted me up there for an ulterior motive, for some other reason. And when that plan did not work out, that put him in a very bad mood. The same thing with his mother. His mother looked at me as if she were angry at me. This was the first time I ever met his mother, and I was very polite, and I introduced myself to her, and she looked at me as if she hated me, as if I was a burden just standing there in her backyard. So I do not think they even offered me anything to eat. So that is not the way you treat a guest. Whenever I have guests over, I make sure that they have plenty to eat, because I want them to feel at home. I don't think they even offered me anything to eat. He had a case of beer that was like a microbrewery beer. Some weird name that I had never heard of. And to be honest, it kind of made me feel unusual. I didn't get a beer buzz, and the whole time I had an agitated feeling. It made you feel strangely like you were nauseated and agitated and very nervous. So something was wrong with that beer. So if you look at these photographs of John Zachar, you could see that he is also a public figure. In the Brookfield area, the Hollywood military establishment put a lot of their public figures and professional actors. That was one of the areas where a lot of these Hollywood types would live. The Brookfield area was one of these areas that I call military-controlled regions, where they put a lot of their actors to live. And John Zachar is also known as Christian Slater. This is Christian Slater. So he does not want anyone to recognize him. So he goes by the name of John Zachar. And he said he was a year or two younger than I was, when in fact he was a few years older than I was. And when he first approached me, he acted like a little annoying kid. He even put on this weird annoying voice. So these actors know how to disguise themselves. They specialize in disguising themselves. They don't want to be recognized. And the only reason he walked up to me was for MK Ultra purposes. That was the reason my mother was moved up to that area to begin with, when she divorced my father and married my stepfather, and we all moved to Brookfield, Connecticut. The military establishment arranged for that to happen for criminal purposes involving mind control and ritual abuse, and their agents are all throughout Hollywood. That is how their agents make money, by acting as public figures in politics, in the media, and in Hollywood. That is why we have Ed Harris, the actor known as Ed Harris, hanging out with Reverend Robert Goss, who was supposedly married to a guy named Joseph Goss, who was really John Zachar, also known as Christian Slater. So I would not be surprised to learn that this is John Zachar's older brother or father. These guys, Ed Harris, Reverend Robert Goss, and John Zachar are all from New Milford, Connecticut. And now they work in Marlborough, New Hampshire, where I have moved. So they are moving up here to spy on me, to say the least. This is their cover, a gay married couple who are both reverends at the Federated Church of Marlborough. Like I said, I would not be surprised to learn that Robert Goss is Christian Slater's father or uncle or some sort of guardian within their Oddfellows order. Sometimes they take an older man and he lives with a young boy that he calls his son, when in fact they are partners, when in fact this older man is having sex with the younger boy. That is his apprentice. That is his apprentice. That will be his partner. The younger man is somebody that they will disguise as a high school student in order to get one of their agents to befriend somebody like me, who has become a target of the MK Ultra program, who has become a target of the Oddfellows organization. My mother, brother, and I have been placed on some sort of list, just like Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas described. There is a list of targets that people are placed on, that their hand of death cult is allowed to go after. We are some of the people that were placed on that list. And when I've gotten older and have gone on to expose groups like the Oddfellows and the Freemasons and the MK Ultra program in the military, I have become one of their main targets. And men like Ed Harris, also known as Otis Toole, Robert Goss, and Christian Slater will follow me wherever I go for criminal purposes, for conspiracy to commit fraud and murder, because that is the big secret in their secret societies. And when you look into the Oddfellows, you realize that they are controlled by the military. It's like a military secret society. They value the fact that their highest ranking members, or all their members, have all served time in the military. And on their website, they have like a newsletter. And their commanders all wear military attire. And the interesting thing about the Oddfellows is that they have all of these junior orders for children. In the Freemasons, I think that you have to be 18 years of age to be a Freemason. But in the Oddfellows, they have like these Cub Scout orders that are part of these Oddfellow organizations. So that is very important, because this group is also into occult ritual abuse and pedophilia. up information on the Federated Church of Marlborough, New Hampshire, I found a YouTube channel that featured the sermons of Reverend Robert Goss and Reverend Joseph Goss. Reverend Joseph Goss was an individual known as John Zachar, who went to Brookfield High School around 1992 or 1993. And John Zachar is actually a famous actor named Christian Slater. So here are a few photographs of John Zachar. Now once again, these actors who are involved with the MK Ultra program know how to change their looks. Christian Slater definitely does not want to be recognized, so they know how to change their looks. So I did a search for Reverend Joseph Goss on Google Images, and I found this photograph. And this looks exactly like an individual I was incarcerated with at the end of 2011. And my charge was carrying a dangerous weapon, which was a loaded .22 caliber rifle. So as you can see, this does not look like Christian Slater at all. You could see it with the John Zachar photos that are taken off of his Facebook page. But you would not recognize him to be Christian Slater from this photograph. So what is interesting is that Bobby Kelly said he was from New Milford, Connecticut. And John Zachar was also from New Milford, Connecticut. He moved to Brookfield and attended Brookfield High School, and then he moved back to New Milford. So I met Bobby Kelly, I think when he walked over to talk to my cellmate one day, and my cellmate introduced him to me. And so he began to walk over to look for my cellmate, and he would ask me, "Have you seen Hank?" if he wasn't in the cell. So I guess we formed something of a friendship. We were incarcerated at the New Haven County Correctional Center in G Block. And G Block is something like a dormitory where there's no bars in front of the different cells, so that you could come and go out of your cell for the most part all day. Unless they're doing checks or getting ready to have meals, you could walk in and out of your cell. So people walk all over our block. So I was held there for 4 months while going to court. So that whole arrest was a setup by the MK Ultra program that I will discuss in full detail later. But for now, I want to stay on the subject of John Zachar, also known as Christian Slater, also known as Bobby Kelly. They chose Christian Slater as an agent of the military, probably due to the fact that Christian Slater had already done jail time. He had done 3 months for drug-related offenses. He had punched his girlfriend and then assaulted a police officer while he was drunk and high on cocaine and heroin. And he did 3 months in jail. So he would be the perfect agent for the MK Ultra program to send into the prison to spy on one of their targets, like myself, that the military arranged to get locked up. So once again, these actors are obviously very used to putting on acts. So that is why the military likes to use actors for undercover work through the MK Ultra program. So it appeared that he was on steroids. How he carried himself suggested that Christian Slater had been given steroids. So what I've noticed is that people who take steroids, their face begins to flesh out a little bit. It gets swollen. And stuff like the eyebrow ridge becomes extended. They kind of get a Neanderthal-like image, especially on their eyebrow ridge. So I had a couple of co-workers that said that they had gotten steroids and they were about to take a cycle of steroids. And I saw the kid's face change. His face got swollen. His eyes appeared to sink into his head a little bit. He got a very mean, kind of cold, primitive look in his eyes. And the his eyebrow ridge appeared to extend forward. So that is some of the effects that steroid use has on people. And of course, steroids are testosterone. They get angry and they develop a primitive look. So you would see Bobby Kelly walk down the block, kind of shuffling like a little Neanderthal. And what I didn't like about him is that he would walk to the cell. After we got to know one another, he would walk to the cell and he would stand there in front of the cell and just stare at me while I was on my bunk, usually doing something like illustrations. I was practicing drawing figures, drawing faces. And instead of walking up and saying, "Hey, what's up?" he would just stand there with a very cold look on his face, kind of staring at you. So the best thing to do is just to ignore them and wait for them to talk like a human being. Now, of course, Christian Slater knows these rules of etiquette, but he was going out of his way to attempt to appear slightly threatening. He wanted to subconsciously put you on edge. He wanted to subconsciously provoke you. And that is some of the things that he would do to do that. So because he did that, I really didn't go out of my way to try to be his friend. I didn't especially like him. And I noticed that he was something of a bully. There was a guy on our block named Kenny Jackson. And Kenny Jackson was a rather big dude. And he also was something of a bully. He also looked like he was on steroids. His muscles were ballooned up. And oftentimes he would get into arguments with people on our block, with people on our tier. So I got along pretty good with Kenny Jackson. We got along pretty good. Especially when he realized that I'm not going to be intimidated or pushed around. And it usually starts psychologically. And if they could push you around psychologically, then they tend to get more brave and see what else they could get away with. So one day, Christian Slater, Bobby Kelly, was in our cell. And he was talking to my cellmate named Hank Gerard. And Kenny Jackson walks over and he starts demanding a soup or something. He wants a ramen noodle soup. And Bobby Kelly and Hank Gerard say, "We don't have one," or "We don't have an extra one." And so Kenny stands there and begins to make these subtle threats. So I said something like, "Kenny, they just told you they didn't have a soup, so just leave them alone and go back to your cell." And Kenny looked like he got nervous for a second, and then he walked back to the cell. So Bobby Kelly is standing there looking at me. And he looked a little nervous when Kenny was kind of picking on them. But when he saw that I did that, Bobby Kelly decided to then go pick on Kenny Jackson. So he followed Kenny Jackson to his cell. And they kind of went down the tier. So I couldn't see what happened. But I could hear Bobby Kelly saying a couple of things. And then Kenny Jackson says, "Yo, what? What did you just say to me? Who do you think I am?" And I heard Kenny Jackson jump off of his bunk and he chased Bobby Kelly back over to our cell. And Kenny Jackson was angry. So that is the nature of a bully. That is what these agents of the MK Ultra program are. They are all bullies. Oftentimes that is why they are made into agents, because they fall for whatever games the military has for them, and they wind up in a lot of trouble, and they wind up getting punked out. They wind up with people taking advantage of them, getting them into trouble, and using them because they are stupid. And many times they are bullies. They like picking on people. So Kenny Jackson had walked over to our cell and was making a fuss that nobody had a soup for him. And when I got pissed off and told him, "Get out of here," he got a little nervous and went back to his cell. And so that put into Bobby Kelly's mind, Kenny Jackson is a little nervous now. So it's okay to go pick on Kenny Jackson. it's time to go pick on Kenny Jackson now because he showed a little weakness. But he didn't. He responded to reason. He knew he was being a little out of line. And when I told him that, he basically walked away. But could Bobby Kelly let him walk away? No. Bobby Kelly had to go pick on him. And that enraged Kenny Jackson, who followed Bobby Kelly back to our cell. He ran back into our cell. And Kenny sat there talking shit to Bobby Kelly. And this time I let him. Because Bobby Kelly deserved that. Because Bobby Kelly was out of line. So that is the nature of their agents. They like picking on people and they are all bullies. And if you stand up to them, they show their true colors, which is cowardice. They are cowards. That is also why they are chosen for the MK Ultra program. Because they let older pedophiles pick on them. That is what the MK Ultra program is. It is pedophilia. And the older pedophiles see which younger people, see which children allow themselves to get molested or picked on. So they become perfect for these secret societies that rely on these type of people that always go along with the authority, no matter how corrupt the authority is. And if the authority is pedophiles, they look for kids that will allow themselves to get abused. So I want to bring up another important thing, which is a very important trait to look for when identifying their agents. And that is, many of their agents have a very immature look about them. So Christian Slater was born in 1969. So in 1993, when he was something like 24 years old, he was passing himself off as a 15-year-old high school kid. I was 16 or 17 years old when Christian Slater identified himself as John Zachar and told me he was 15 years old. So that is what happens to these young agents when they are sexually abused growing up. They keep this very immature look throughout their whole life. Even when they are old men, they have a baby face. They have a very immature or young looking face about them, even when they are old men. And I think that has to do with that part of their psyche is frozen at a very young age when they are being abused. So a normal person will want to mature because that is what is attractive. They want to grow up. They want to be like their parents. They want to grow up because that is what regular people are attracted to. Mature men or women who are developing. What are pedophiles attracted to? They're attracted to young kids. They are sexually attracted to young kids. So if they have a secret society of pedophiles, what do you think the trait will be if they want to look attractive to the other people in their group? And that is a very immature look. If they know these pedophiles are attracted to young boys, these kids will go out of their way to appear young for as long as possible. And that is very easy to do if your psyche gets frozen when you're 13 or 14 years old due to the trauma of being sexually abused by these older pedophiles. It psychologically damages the child and stops the development. It hurts their development. So that is a trait. They look very young, and when they're in their 20s or 30s, they often pass themselves off as 14 or 15-year-old kids. And the MK Ultra program considers that a valuable trait in putting their 25 or 30-year-old young men and women next to these children, next to these high school kids that have become the military's targets. I was placed on a list along with my mother and my brother when I was a young kid. So Christian Slater, at 24 years old, is a perfect agent to send into Brookfield High School with the fake identity of John Zachar, some 15-year-old kid who just moved to Brookfield. So if you look at a few of these photographs of Christian Slater, you could tell that he kind of has this elf-type look. Look at the shape of his eyes. They look almost almond-shaped. He has a very elfish look to him. That is a very common look of these people involved in the MK Ultra program. So what is funny is that as these men get older, many of them grow beards. That is a common practice in these secret societies like the Freemasons or the Knights Templar that are controlled by the military. As these young men start getting into their 40s, start getting older, they are taught to grow long beards so they look less feminine and they can hide their baby faces. So many of these men grow beards and it hides their baby faces. And I don't care if they're 6 feet tall, they resemble dwarfs. So you got these pedophiles looking like elves when they are younger. And when they start getting older, many of them take steroids. They take male testosterone. And they are taught to grow beards to camouflage their baby faces or their feminine faces. So what is interesting is that throughout history, there have been mythological figures, mythological characters that are in legends and myths. And they talk about these almost human or near human characters that are called elves or dwarfs or fairies. And quite often, these mythological near human characters have supernatural powers. And they often play tricks on human beings. They talk about leprechauns or fairies or elves or dwarfs carrying people off, kidnapping children and taking them off to the elf land. So all throughout the myths and legends are stories about these near human characters that try to manipulate or control humankind, often by attacking them or playing tricks on them. And this is all symbolic for these pedophile cults, these secret societies that have gone back into ancient times. Everybody knows what these people look like. When you come in contact with them, many times they are short, many times they are smaller, many times they are a small stature. But even if they're bigger, they'll have these traits where they look elf-like or dwarf-like in their appearances. So the word fairies comes from the word fae, and that is spelled F-A-E. And they often spell the word fairy F-A-E-R-I-E. And so the fae historically means a cult, which is involved in pagan religions that practice pedophilia and human sacrifice. The fae. So that is the source of the word fairy. And that is often a derogatory term that is used to describe homosexuals. So this is where it is sourced from. This is what these myths and legends are based on. There's a little truth to all these myths and legends that we may read. So that is why elf people and dwarves are common figures involved with witchcraft, magic, or Dungeons and Dragons type books. Because these are symbolic for pedophile groups that are controlled by evil forces. Elves, fairies, dwarfs are all traditionally known figures that bother humans, play tricks on them, attack them, or attempt to control them with magic or power. So that is why elf people and dwarfs are common figures in our myths that are associated with witchcraft, magic, or Dungeons and Dragons type themes. Because this is all symbolic for these pedophile groups that are controlled by evil forces. And elves, fairies, dwarfs like Rumpelstiltskin are all traditionally known as figures that bother humans, that play tricks on them, that attack them, that try to set them up in these mind games, or attempt to control them with magic or power, because these practices have gone back into ancient times. So that is what they did with Christian Slater. When he was in his 20s, Christian Slater has this elf-type look. So when he started to get older, I think Bobby Kelly said he was 40-something. In 2011, he said he was something like 42 or 43. And that lines up with Christian Slater's birth date in 1969. And again, it looked like he was taking roids. He was real stocky, and his face kind of had a caveman type appearance to it. So he looked very much the same as this photograph here. So that is how it went. I was looking up information on the Federated Church in Marlborough, New Hampshire. I saw this Reverend Goss, Reverend Joseph Goss. He looked familiar, and at first I couldn't place it. And then I recognized him to be John Zachar. And when I did a search on Google Images, I found this photograph. And I said, that's Bobby Kelly, who I met in jail in 2011. So all of these guys are the same guy. And thinking back, it became obvious who John Zachar was. That being Christian Slater. So Bobby Kelly told me a few things about himself when we were incarcerated together. At the end of 2011, I believe I was arrested in October of 2011, and I was released in February or the beginning of March of 2012. So I was in there for 4 months at the New Haven County Correctional Center. I was first put into S Unit, and then I went into B Block, and then I was transferred to G Block, and that was where I met Christian Slater, who went by the name of Bobby Kelly. So Bobby Kelly told me a few things about his life. So once again, he said he was from New Milford, the same as John Zachar. He only went to Brookfield High School for a short time because his father rented a house in Brookfield, but then they moved back to New Milford. So Bobby Kelly said that he had a 7-year-old son through a relationship that he had with a girl whose last name was Cable. So I forget what her name was, but he said that they had a kid together. And then I think he said she got arrested for drugs. So it was just him and his son for a little while living in New Milford. And he said at some point he met a new girlfriend, and he had a photograph of his new girlfriend and his 7-year-old son. He had that in jail. Obviously, it was sent to him in the mail or something. And he showed me that photograph, and the woman looked older. She kind of looked like a heavy woman who was in her late 50s. And she looked like Helena Blavatsky. That's the only person I know to compare her to. She had these large, round eyes that kind of bugged out a little bit. And she resembled Helena Blavatsky. And she's holding his 7-year-old son, posing for a photograph. So Bobby Kelly said that he was locked up. He was in and out of jail for drug-related reasons. And at some point, he had signed over custody of his 7-year-old son to this new girlfriend of his, who he met in New Milford. And after he got locked up, his new girlfriend took his son and moved to Florida. So that's quite a ways away from Connecticut. So that is the nature of these secret societies, which is having kids and then handing them over to people like this older woman, who will then take over being a parent and even move your kid into a whole different state across the country. And you're not going to know what happens to your son or your daughter. So this is how kids go on to get molested. This is what keeps their pedophile groups running. So if his son managed to survive, my guess is he's just another little child abused victim who was programmed to be used by pedophiles and to grow up bisexual or homosexual, much like his father and the rest of these agents in these secret societies. So I had heard of the name Cable. Once again, they are a notorious family from New Milford, Connecticut They're known as something like rednecks. They're known to have a rather big family. And I was told a story where there was some sort of feud, some sort of family feud that the Cables had with another family in New Milford. And there was fights. There was a gang fight at the New Milford Town Green. So one of the older Cables that had a really bad reputation and was known as the tough guy was named Zeke Cable. And that's spelled Z-E-E-K. And as I said in the previous video, I believe that Zeke Cable is actually Dennis Witzke, who was my mother's boyfriend in the late 1990s. So if you look at the spelling of Witzke's last name, it's W-I-T-Z-K-E. That's almost Zeke. So maybe he got the name from his last name. So that suggests that Dennis Witzke is also known as Zeke Cable in New Milford, Connecticut. So Bobby Kelly said that Zeke Cable had a relationship with his niece, and they were producing children together. They had more than one child together. And he said that at New Milford Hospital, somebody like a nurse or a hospital administrator told them, you cannot continue to have kids together because you are related, and that is not healthy. And they were going to report Zeke Cable to the state if he continued to bring his niece into the hospital, pregnant with his children. So this is what Bobby Kelly, also known as Christian Slater, told me about Zeke Cable. And he said he knew the Cables because he dated a Cable girl, had a son with her, but then she was locked up, I think for drugs, and so he lost touch with her. And I asked him, where do the Cables live in New Milford? And he says, I think a bunch of them live over by the town green. And I asked him, do they live on Railroad Street? And he said, no, the street before that one. Once you go over the bridge, it's the street that you come to before you hit Railroad Street. So I think he was referring to Youngsfield Road. And that is important if you view the investigative documentary entitled Vatican Hill, Video Evidence, and also listen to the audio recording entitled Vatican Hill. And that is on my affiliate channel called Bulletproof Cyrus 13. It's a very important documentary series to look at that exposes a great deal of what is happening in New Milford, Connecticut. And after you get done watching Vatican Hill, I highly recommend the Flower of Life video series that also mentions New Milford, Connecticut. So as I exposed in the previous video, Zeke Cable is really the actor known as Ed Harris. And before that, he was known as the serial killer named Otis Toole. So what these celebrities like to do is have multiple identities. So they take on these identities of Otis Toole and Zeke Cable when they are in areas like New Milford, Connecticut and Florida, and they are known as rednecks. They are known as people living in poverty. They are known as tough and scary people with very bad reputations, when in fact they are often well off. They are often rich people, actors, celebrities, politicians. So it's a merger between the upper class and the lower class in the MK Ultra program. That is what you see time and time again throughout this. You have Leon Panetta, who was the director of the CIA, among many other things. He was known as Eddie Lee Sexton, who ran an MK Ultra, intergenerational, satanic, ritual abuse household. You have John Brennan, who was a CIA director, also known as Stephen Hayes. And Stephen Hayes was arrested with a younger man named Joshua Komisarjevsky, who is actually Sean Stone, the son of Oliver Stone, the famous movie director. And they had broken into somebody's home in Cheshire, Connecticut. I think they raped the family. They raped and killed the man's wife and his daughters. And then they set the house on fire with the family in it. And this guy goes on to change his identity and become the director of the CIA. And you have Otis Toole admitting to committing 1,000 murders. And he goes on to become Ed Harris, famous Hollywood star. And he is known as Zeke Cable in the New Milford, Connecticut area. So it shouldn't be a surprise to learn that Christian Slater, a very popular Hollywood actor, goes by the names of John Zachar and Bobby Kelly in the New Milford, Connecticut area. And he also comes across as being a tough individual. He kind of acted like he was a biker. He told me that he hung out with a group called the Charter Oak Motorcycle Club, which was supposedly an affiliate of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. And the Charter Oaks had a bar that they hung out in New Milford, Connecticut. So all of these celebrities and government officials are all part of this MK Ultra program that has to do with secret societies, pedophilia, ritual murder, homicides, incest, human trafficking. So that is what they do when they get home or go back to one of their houses that they own in Florida or own in New Milford, Connecticut or own in New Hampshire. And then they go to Washington, D.C., or they get before the news cameras to be interviewed. And they say that they are the director of the CIA. They are your senators, your governors, the heads of the FBI, the heads of different police precincts. But they are all involved in these MK Ultra abuses in their secret societies. So you have Zeke Cable, also known as Dennis Witzke, from the New Milford, Connecticut area, photographed with Reverend Robert Goss. So they are at some dog show, I'm going to guess around the New Milford area. So in this picture, Dennis Witzke looks about the same age as he did in the late 90s. And then many years later, in 2021, Dennis Witzke's friend here, identified to be Robert Goss, is now a preacher at the Federated Church in Marlborough, New Hampshire. And he is married to none other than John Zachar, also known as Bobby Kelly, also known as Christian Slater. So you have that New Milford link once again. For some reason, this group is now in the Keene, New Hampshire area. And that, of course, is where I relocated to be close to my daughters when my ex-wife and I got separated and she moved back home when I was incarcerated. So again, that is another story. The event that led up to me getting arrested. The charge was carrying a loaded firearm in my vehicle. And it's because of that I was separated from my wife and daughters. So that is what they like to do, is they like to break up families, get the real men out of the picture, get the real dads out of the picture. And that often leaves the family vulnerable for one of their agents to move in and act as the stepfather or the mom's new boyfriend. And this often leads to that family becoming enslaved or killed by these tyrants like Ed Harris, also known as Zeke Cable, and John Brennan, the CIA director, also known as Stephen Hayes, and his partner in crime named Joshua Komisarjevsky, who is actually Sean Stone, the actor, and the son of the famous director Oliver Stone. So if you look at Vatican Hill video evidence, you'll hear the story about how I ended up in New Milford at the end of 2013 looking for an apartment when the one I was staying at in Derby, Connecticut became unlivable due to the agents that occupied that building. I was basically forced onto the street, and I wound up in New Milford, Connecticut, looking for another room to rent. And while looking for employment, I was introduced to a man named Terrence Eck, who I believe to be John Brennan, also known as Stephen Hayes, the individual who killed a family in Cheshire, Connecticut. And that was big news in the Waterbury area, because Cheshire, Connecticut is a nice town right next to Waterbury, Connecticut. So I remember reading about Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky in the newspaper. So he did not get locked up too long. If you read the internet right now, they'll tell you that both of those individuals are still incarcerated. But the truth is that they are on the street, acting as famous actors, and the director of the CIA. And Stephen Hayes was seen in New Milford, Connecticut at the end of 2013, going by the name of Terrence Eck. So I think all of these individuals are in the same group, and Christian Slater obviously is another member of their group. And he now goes by the name of Reverend Joseph Goss at the Federated Church in Marlborough, New Hampshire. And this is his husband, Reverend Robert Goss of the Federated Church in Marlborough, New Hampshire. And both of these men have ties to New Milford, Connecticut. So the last thing I want to discuss is that many of these agents, they are homosexual, but I guess you can look at many of them as bisexual. I guess how they are conditioned in their secret societies is that they are conditioned to be primarily gay. They want to divide the sexes, much like in the military or in religions like the Roman Catholic Church. They want to divide the sexes. They want to program these kids to be homosexual. But at the same time, these kids are often molested growing up by both men and women. They are taught to have sex with anybody and everybody. Often these intergenerational occult groups have group sex. Oftentimes these young people are used in pornography, both straight and gay pornography. So they are conditioned to have sex with everybody. So they are bisexual. But at their core, these people are homosexual, because that is what is demanded in their groups that exist to make the family unit disappear. They want to abolish the family unit in the future. They do not want families. They want the country governed by a military police state. They want society to function like a cult, a military or religious cult that divides the sexes, because that helps instill in all of their agents that they are not individuals. They are not independent. So that is what gives people independence and creates individuals. It starts with your family. It starts with your identity. My name is John Kelly Harwood. My father is John Kelly Harwood Sr. He married Linda Cordova. My brother's name is Chris Harwood. I married Rachel Vogt. And my daughters' names are Eliza Harwood and Michaela Harwood. In these groups, they don't even have names anymore. They have dozens of aliases. In these groups, they don't even have names anymore. They have no identity whatsoever. And they are all taught to look the same, to act the same, and all play the same role. They don't want your president of the United States to be one individual. Your president, Joe Biden, before that, Donald Trump, will be played by several different men. They'll bring these men, these actors, these secret society members into a makeup lab to have the president mask stamped on their faces. They do not want any individuality whatsoever. So they are the enemy of the family unit. When they are growing up, they are molested by all the different members of their secret society. They are taught that sex is not special. They are raised as prostitutes, child prostitutes. When they get older, they often get into pornography. And then they take their young men and women and say, go marry one of the real people from a real family. So your son or your daughter that you raised up, you did everything you could to raise them up well, to raise them as good people. They are going to marry some weird gangbang prostitute that comes from some incest family. And are these people impoverished? Are they depraved? No. They're millionaires. They're part of the establishment. And this is what we heard about European nobility. This is why the Americans wanted to break off from England. They knew what the rich families were like in Europe and in England. They knew what these so-called noble houses were like. They were all inbred. They were victims of incest. And they were more like a military cult or some pagan religion coven than they were a real family. So this is part of the reason we revolted and split off from England, because England is controlled by a pack of crazies who are into pedophilia and incest and the destruction of families. So even Bobby Kelly, when he married a cable girl, that's what he called her. For all we know, she was a normal girl from a regular family in New Milford. And he just called her that. Because that's a way to say, oh, she's a insider. Oh, she's a cable. It might be a code name. It might be a front name. So we don't know what happened to her. He said he married her or he dated her. She gave him a son and then she disappeared. She got arrested or she ran off or she moved. That doesn't make much sense. So he was stuck alone with his son. And at some point he met an older woman who looked like an older lesbian agent. She looked like Helena Blavatsky in the photograph that he had in jail. So he said that he was drunk one night. He had been doing a lot of drinking for a few months and he was passed out on the sofa and he heard his new girlfriend get home and he heard someone talking to her, saying something to her, but he couldn't make out what. And so he ran outside and he saw a young man talking to his new girlfriend, this woman that he dated. And she looked upset. She looked disturbed. So he ran over and started to attack the young man who was talking to his girlfriend. I think he said asking for a quarter to use the payphone. And he said he beat that kid to a pulp. And he was arrested. And it turned out that that kid that he beat up was the son of a judge or the mayor of New Milford. It was one of those two things. I cannot remember. And so they really threw the book at him and he was incarcerated. So that was the story he told me in 2011. So if you add all the facts together, his kid was 7 years old. So his kid was probably born around 2003. And at some point, he lost his first girlfriend, the mother of his son, and his second girlfriend moved in. So my guess is that it was sometime after 2003, maybe around 2005. And so I guess that is what first broke him up from his son and got him incarcerated. So I guess that is when his new girlfriend took custody of his son. So something like that could be arranged by the secret society. Bobby Kelly, also known as Christian Slater, has a young son. He's the kid's father. So they move in this older woman who's an agent. They know he's drunk one night. They know he's in a blackout, or they know he's pissed off. And they get some random kid to come bother his girlfriend. And it's all a setup. And so she acts like this kid is disturbing her more than he really is. She acts horrified at this kid walking up and I think he said asking for a quarter to use the payphone. And so drunken Bobby Kelly runs and attacks that kid and ends up getting arrested and incarcerated. And his new girlfriend wants him to sign custody of his son over to her so she could move out of Connecticut all the way to Florida. So that is why I say that all of these agents are the first to fall for all of their secret societies games. All of these mind control games they play on everybody, especially members of their organization. That is what they prefer to deal with. People with problems. They are very easy to control. They are very easy to blackmail. They are used to being told what to do. These are the people they want to be successes. These are the people they want in the public eye because they're very easy to control. They're used to living without any individuality or any freedoms outside of their cult that determines what they are going to do from day to day. And many of these types demand that. They like being told what to do. They don't know what to do on their own. They're bored. They don't have any individual pursuits. They have nothing to do. Even if you make them multi-millionaires, these people are often greedy. They'll take all of their millions and they'll put it into a bank account, and all of that money will stay in that bank account. They'll never take it out. And when they die, they don't leave it to anybody. So the bank gets rid of it. These banks that control the American economy, they don't need any more money. They try to figure out ways to get rid of money because of the out of control inflation. So giving millions of dollars to these people like Ed Harris or Stephen Root or some royal figure, they know they are just going to hoard the money. And oftentimes when they die, nobody's there to claim the money. So it just gets taken back over by their cult. So these are the type of people that they prefer to deal with, who have no individuality. They have no freedoms. They have no individual pursuits. They have no kids to leave the money to. So the money just gets taken right back over by the cult. So these are the type of people that the MK Ultra cult prefers to deal with, because they're very easy to control. They're very easy to blackmail. They're very easy to intimidate. They're very easy to trigger, to do things, to fall for their games. They're very easy to molest, to abuse. They're very easy to take their kids from. So these agents of the MK Ultra program are the first to fall victim to all the practices of their own organization